Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into a force that impacts every single one of us every single day. It's called inflation, and it's the invisible reason why that money in your wallet just doesn't seem to go as far as it used to. So let's break it down.
Okay, let's start with something really concrete. Back in 1967, you could grab a Big Mac for just 45 cents. Fast forward to today, and that same burger is going to set you back almost $4. So, what on earth happened? How did we get from there to here?
Well, the one-word answer is inflation, but that single word is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It represents a whole universe of economic forces, government policies, and global events. And really understanding it is the key to getting a handle on your own financial world. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll figure out what inflation actually is. Then we'll look at why prices go up in the first place. After that, we'll see how it directly hits your wallet. We'll meet the folks whose job it is to keep it under control. And finally, we'll see what happens when things go completely off the rails. All right, first up, what exactly is inflation? It can sound like a really complicated idea, so let's use a simple story to get our heads around it. So the official definition is pretty dry, right? A general increase in prices and a fall in the purchasing value of money. But I love this last part, more money chasing fewer goods. That really gets to the heart of it. But to make it stick, let's imagine a tiny little village.
Okay, picture this. In our little village, the government decides to just hand everyone a big stack of cash to get the economy going. Awesome, right? Everyone feels rich. They all rush down to the only market in town, ready to buy all the stuff they've been dreaming about. Now, it turns out that almost everyone in the village wants the exact same thing, that shiny new bicycle in the shop window. The shopkeeper is ecstatic at first, but then he notices a problem. He's selling bikes way faster than he can get new ones. Demand is through the roof, but his supply is dwindling. So, what do you think the shopkeeper does? Well, it's pretty simple. He sees all these people with cash in hand, all competing for his last few bikes, so he just raises the price. And that right there, that simple act, is inflation in a nutshell. Too much money, not enough stuff. Okay, so that village story gives us the basic idea. But in the real world, what are the big economic engines that actually cause prices to rise? It usually boils down to three main culprits.
When you dig into it, economists will tell you that inflation is typically driven by one of these three things. Think of them as the different ways that economic engine can start to overheat.
So first, you've got demand pull inflation. This is basically our village bike story, but on a global scale. When everybody wants to buy the same thing, whether it's houses, cars, or toilet paper, and there just isn't enough to go around, sellers can charge more. The high demand is literally pulling the prices up. Then there's cost push inflation. This one comes from the other side of the equation. It's when the actual cost of making something goes up. So let's say a big drought makes corn more expensive. Well, the guy who sells you popcorn at the movies now has to pay more for his corn kernels. And to stay in business, he has to pass that extra cost on to you. The higher cost is pushing the final price up. And finally, the third one takes us right back to our village. It's simply having more money in the system. If a government prints more money or banks make it super easy to get loans, there's more cash flowing around. But if the amount of stuff to buy, the number of cars, houses, and loaves of bread stays the same, then each dollar is just worth a little bit less. So prices have to go up to match. So all this theory is great, but let's get down to brass tacks. How does all of this economic stuff actually affect you and the money in your bank account? Let's talk about your wallet. To make this super clear, let's just pick a number. Let's say, for example, that the inflation rate for 1 year was 8%. What does that actually mean?
Well, it means that the $100 bill you had tucked away last year can now only buy what $92 could buy back then. You still have the $100 bill, but its actual power, its ability to buy you things, has shrunk. It's like a silent tax on your cash.
And this is where things get really interesting, because inflation is a real double-edged sword. For savers, it's terrible news. The cash you've worked so hard to put away is slowly losing its value over time. But for people who owe money, like with a fixed-rate mortgage, it can actually be a good thing. Why? Because the value of the money they have to pay back is also decreasing. They're paying back their loan with dollars that are worth less than the ones they borrowed. It's a really strange and powerful dynamic. So if inflation is this massive force shaping our economy, you have to ask, who's flying the plane? Who is supposed to be in charge of keeping this all in balance?
Well, there are two main pilots.
The biggest player is a country's central bank, which in the US is the Federal Reserve, or the Fed. Their main weapon against inflation is interest rates. Here's how it works. When inflation gets too high, they raise interest rates. That makes it more expensive for you to get a car loan or a mortgage, and for businesses to borrow money to expand. So what happens? People and businesses borrow and spend less, which cools down the overall demand in the economy. And that, in turn, helps to slow down those price increases. The other pilot is the government itself, and they use something called fiscal policy. They have two main levers to pull. They can raise taxes, which means all of us have less money left over to spend, or they can cut back on their own spending, building fewer roads or launching fewer big public projects. Both of those actions help to take some of the heat out of the economy and reduce overall demand. But what happens when that delicate balancing act totally fails? What happens when inflation isn't just a minor problem, but spirals completely out of control? Let's take a look at the nightmare scenario: hyperinflation.
This is when the economic engine just completely melts down. We're talking about prices doubling every single day, which happened in Zimbabwe back in 2008. Or even crazier, look at Hungary after World War II, where prices were jumping by a mind-boggling 150,000% a day. At that point, money pretty much becomes meaningless.
This quote from a journalist visiting Venezuela during its hyperinflation crisis just captures the sheer absurdity of it all. He saw a man on the street making bags and purses out of cash because the physical paper bills were literally more valuable as a craft material than they were as actual currency. Just think about that for a second. So after hearing about all that chaos, you might think the ideal goal should be 0% inflation, right? No price increases at all. Well, surprisingly, no. Most economists will tell you that a little bit of inflation, somewhere around 2% per year, is actually a good thing. It's a sign of a healthy, growing economy, and it encourages people to spend or invest their money instead of just hoarding it. The opposite, falling prices or deflation, is actually way more dangerous because if everyone knows things will be cheaper tomorrow, no one buys anything today, and the whole economy can grind to a halt. So that leaves us with the real takeaway here. The challenge isn't to kill inflation. It's to manage it. It's to master this incredibly powerful force and keep it in that perfect, productive balance.